Hey guys, I'm Dov, and today I'm back with a very special video. Yes, indeed. A lot of you have been bugging me to release my tier list, and I wanted to explain to you guys why I hate tier lists, why I'm not really a fan of them, and then, of course, naturally, I'll be sharing my tier list with you. So, first up, why I hate tier lists. Well, they're kind of garbage, to be honest. For number one, different players have different perceptions of factions and matchups, and like my tier list may be vastly different from Turin's tier list, which may be vastly different from Jonton's tier list, etc. So, in general, they're not really a reliable source of information for you, the viewer, because we all have very differing opinions on the tier lists. It also changes all the time. New patches come out, things change, and even within a certain patch, there's almost like a revolving meta, or oftentimes an evolving meta, where the meta changes over time despite there not being any patches. We definitely saw that with the Rise of the Tomb Kings, and again, we're seeing it more with the Kreen and the Crone, again, as people kind of learn different mechanics, try out different things, find new ways of doing things. You know, it changes, the meta changes, so this tier list is completely subject to change. Therefore, I'm not crazy about spending the time to put it together, but I did it just for you guys since you've been bothering me so much. But anyway, it's very much also matchup dependent. Like, you know, it's good and bad matchups. Every faction just about has good and bad matchups, so there's that to consider as well. And I don't want you guys to draw any incorrect conclusions, is my main point here of this kind of big caveat, and why I'm really not a fan of tier lists to begin with. I just don't want you guys coming up with conclusions that are incorrect, or basing your assumptions off of my conclusions. Again, this kind of goes back to the first point. Different players have different perceptions, and yeah, what I think may not be necessarily what someone else thinks, and therefore it may not necessarily be correct, but there you go. The game's pretty well balanced overall, and that's why in a lot of my videos I try and give you guys the tools to be able to try and think for yourselves, think about different matchups in different ways, read the stats, read the tooltips, and kind of figure things out for yourself. That's always been my goal, and I hope to continue doing that. And so overall, me just putting out a tier list and saying, here's what I think are the best factions, you know, it may not be that helpful to you at the end of the day, but you guys have been asking for it, so let's get straight to it. How I make my tier list, real quick, I want to explain my methodology here. So basically what I've gone through is I've listed every faction and every matchup for that faction, and I've given it either a plus for good matchup, equals, you know, for an even matchup, or minus for a bad matchup. So then I go in and tabulate, okay, how many good matchups versus how many bad matchups, and then that value is what determines the overall score. So we're going to start at the bottom and work our way up. In case of tiebreakers, the faction with more bad matchups loses. The faction with less bad matchups wins. If there's still a tiebreaker at that point, whatever the head-to-head matchup is, and I didn't ever have to break a tiebreaker beyond that, so that's as far as I got. Let's get straight to it then. Coming in at number 14, the lowly, the ever-furry, and cuddly Skaven. Yes, indeed. I'm sure this will change once the Skaven get their Lord DLC, but as it is right now, they're the only faction that doesn't have any good matchups in my eyes whatsoever. There's really no matchup I feel that's very comfortable for them. And they do have several matchups that are not great. They're coming in at a -4 with 0 good matchups and 4 bad matchups. You can see they actually, 4 bad matchups is not that bad. Most matchups are actually pretty even, and again, this is why I don't really like tier lists in the first place, because I don't really feel that the Skaven are that bad, but just by my methodology here, they ended up being in last place, so hey, there you go. That's why I don't like tier lists very much, but yeah, no good matchups, at least in my eyes, and several matchups that are not great. Mean they come in last place. Next up, there no regiments for now, no special lords counterpart, the Lizardmen. Yes, indeed. And this was one that honestly surprised me a little bit. The Lizardmen overall are a very strong faction, I feel, but they do suffer a little bit in certain matchups. They're coming in at a -3 with 2 good matchups and 5 bad matchups. So overall, pretty decent. 5 bad matchups is not great, and a lot of those are the really heavy AP missile factions that can kite pretty effectively. Like, well, the dwarves can't really kite, but they just bring such heavy AP, and the lizardmen aren't a super fast faction to begin with. They're dinosaurs, and their mainline kind of bread and butter infantry, Saurus and Temple Guard, really aren't that fast, so they are definitely vulnerable to good missile play, and so a lot of those matchups are those type of matchups. But yeah, a little bit sad for the lizardmen, and again, hopefully this will change when they get their Lord DLC along with the Skaven. Moving on here to the ever-chivalrous Knights of the Lady. Yes, indeed, Bretonnia definitely got better in the last patch. They're coming in at, again, a -3, but they have the edge over the Lizardmen in that they have only 4 bad matchups, 1 good matchup. But yeah, Bretonnia overall is pretty solid. Again, not that many bad matchups, but just not that many great matchups either. They're pretty even across the board, especially with a lot of the higher tier factions. But yeah, overall, pretty decent. They definitely could still use some love, but hopefully they'll get some more love with upcoming patches, maybe some more changes. You can watch some of my other videos if you want to know my thoughts about that. Moving on to the next ones, we've got the Beastmen. Yes, indeed. They've fallen pretty far. They used to be the strongest faction in Total War Warhammer 2, but just with everything that's changed, new factions, new releases, you know, updated units, and so on, they've kind of fallen a little bit. Don't get me wrong, they're still very strong, coming in at -2, 1 good matchup and 3 bad matchups. So, I mean, really, most of the matchups for them, that's 9 matchups that are even. So that's very, very good overall. It's just, again, by the methodology here, just having not as many good matchups is something that's a little bit rough for the Beastmen, but still not too bad. Coming in at number 10, and those last 4 is what I kind of call the C tier, the Skaven, Lizardmen, Bretonnia, and Beastmen. We're now moving into B tier with number 10, the Tomb Kings. Yes, indeed, Tomb Kings were pretty powerful, although they've definitely taken some nerfs. The Bone Giant is a great buff, though, featured prominently in this image here before you. Definitely a very nice addition and keeps the Tomb Kings relevant and competitive. The Tomb Kings are one of the factions that has the most skewed matchups. They have 5 good matchups and 6 bad matchups, which is the most good and bad like total, I think, of any faction. They're very skewed. It's either great or it's bad for the most part. There are some matchups that are pretty even, but yeah, they're coming in at -1 total. And yeah, Tomb Kings, I think, are reasonably well balanced overall, and they've got plenty of love, so I don't see them getting a whole lot of new stuff or changes. You know, always stat tweaks here and there, of course, but yeah, overall in a very good place right now, I think. Next up in B tier, we have their undead cousins, the Vampire Counts. Yes, indeed. Vampires are pretty solid right now. A lot of the matchups historically that have been tough for them are pretty doable. They're coming in at a -1 also, with 3 good matchups and 4 bad matchups. So, Krell, of course, featured prominently in this image here, is going to be a big part of that. Blood Knights have got much better in the last patch, just overall. Vampires in a pretty solid place right now. Definitely liking where they're at. They can compete with a lot of factions just fine. There's only a handful that are a little bit tough for them still. But moving on quickly, as I don't have a ton of time to record this, we've got next up in B tier, number 8, the Dwarfs. Yes, indeed, the Proud Dawi would have been higher on this list had they kept the Tormentor Sword, but that alone knocks them down quite a bit. In terms of their spread here, they're at a -1 with 3 good matchups and 4 bad matchups, which is the same as the Vampire Counts. They actually own the tiebreaker there because, at least in my view, the Dwarfs have some really solid answers to what the Vampire Counts can bring. You guys may dispute that, but again, that's why I don't really like tier lists, although I would highly encourage you to dispute that down in the comments below. Next up here, we've got the counterpart to the Dwarfs, the greenskins, of course. Coming in at the top of B tier at number 7, the greenskins are actually have a total score of 0 with 3 good matchups and 3 bad matchups. They're right dead center, strong overall, a little bit vulnerable to Lord Sniping and Terror Bombing, but still a very strong faction. The new wall mechanic is very powerful, and Wurzag, of course, an absolute MVP right now. Azag is still very competitive, but hopefully some of their other lords get some buffs, and we can see some more variety in terms of lord choices, but Greenskin's definitely in a very solid place right now. Next up, we're moving into A tier now. This is the Wood Elves at +2 with 5 good matchups and 3 bad matchups. The Wood Elves, of course, a staple of competitive play. Take a bit of skill, but you know, the Regiments of Renown definitely help, and just overall, they're still super solid. Playwatcher's not quite as broken as they used to be, although they're still a little bit strong for my taste. That's mostly just due to how I play. I'm not the biggest fan of that playstyle, but I know there are other people who really do like that playstyle, so Wood Elves, though, pretty strong. Hopefully they'll get some new Legendary Lords and other stuff down the line, but we'll have to wait and see on that. Next up here, also in A tier, the High Elves coming in with the same score total, +2, but they have less bad matchups and less good matchups. Only 4 good matchups, but only 2 bad matchups, so more even across the board, but because they have less bad matchups, they do have the tiebreaker over the Wood Elves. The High Elves, with the Queen and the Crone DLC, got a lot stronger. They got some much-needed tools. Olariel is an absolute beast. Sisters of Avalorn are good in the right situation. And yeah, just overall, the Azur are looking pretty strong right now. There are not too many situations where I feel uncomfortable with the High Elves. But yeah, we're getting ever closer to the top. Now we are on to the next one in A tier, number 4. Norska. Yes, indeed. Norska came out swinging like an absolute powerhouse, and a big part of that is the rejuvenated Famir, the old one-eyed beasties of yonder years, really shining right now. Wulfric himself is an absolute G. The aimable Seafang is just awesome, both in campaign and in multiplayer, so I'm loving that. Yeah, Norska is one of those factions that hopefully get some other legendary lords down the line, but other than that, they're super solid right now. They really don't need much in the way of love. But yeah, moving on to the next one, we're in the home stretch now. We've got the Proud Empire. Yes, indeed. Bask in Balthazar Gelt's glory as we discuss the Empire Resurgent. Certainly, with the most recent patch, they've been getting progressively better and better after coming in at one of the weakest factions of Total War Warhammer 2 after having dominance the entirety of the first game, just about. But yeah, definitely coming back to their own. Their artillery is really on point right now. Old Balthazar is actually quite useful. I like him quite a bit. In general, their Lord and Hero selection's pretty good. Karl Franz could still be a little bit better for my taste, but he's quite good. I use him pretty often, and just in general, the Empire characters are quite good. Their troops are, you know, they do more or less what you would expect. Have a lot of variety, can go a lot of different directions. In terms of their score, they're sitting at a +3 with 5 good matchups and 2 bad matchups. Norska has the same score, but the Empire definitely has the tiebreaker in that matchup, at least in my eyes. They just have so many answers to what Norska can bring. Very effective fire damage, probably the most effective fire damage faction in the game, and just some crazy Lord Gooning power or sniping power with like Tempelhof Luminarchs, old Balthazar himself. You've got great heavy cavalry, good skirmish, artillery, you know, decent infantry, although their infantry leaves somewhat to be desired. Their cheap infantry is pretty good, and their more expensive infantry got better, but I think there still needs to be a little bit of fine-tuning there, but overall, Empire in a glorious position. Now we just need some more start positions for campaign. But moving on, number 2, the Dark Elves. Yes, indeed, Dark Elves have been a powerhouse since day 1 of Game 2, and I expected it as such, and I expect them to continue their dominance. You know, with the Queen and the Crone DLC, they got a lot of new tools, and that just made them that much stronger. They definitely are in a pretty dominant position right now, coming in at +3 with 4 good matchups and only 1 bad matchup. So very strong. They're probably going to get one more Legendary Lord. My money's on Malice Darkblade, but, you know, it could be anybody from the lore, really. But I don't think they'll get much else besides a new Lord in the way of new stuff. But, yeah, they're in a super solid place right now, so it's not like they really need much else. And that leaves only one. Yes, indeed, in a tier all by themselves. The God tier, the S tier, if you will. The one, the only Warriors of Chaos. Yes, indeed, coming in at a whopping +6 with 6 good matchups and 0 bad matchups. There honestly, in my eyes, is not a single matchup where the Warriors of Chaos struggle right now. They are just an inexorable force. Just unrelenting completely. They have one of the best magic selections in the game, some of the best lords in the game. They really don't have that great of heroes selection, a little bit lacking in terms of direct support, but their units pound for pound are some of the strongest in the game. They really don't have much in the way of skirmish, although their skirmish cavalry is premier, don't get me wrong. I love me some Marauder Horsemen, but yeah, just the frontline inexorable rush of Chaos is so strong right now. And yeah, Big Bird is an absolute powerhouse. Kolek is a world beater, although in many situations I would prefer Big Bird. Even Archaon's good now. Sigvald is still, you know, if you want a tank lord, he's a great option, don't get me wrong. And just in general, Chaos has so many options, and there's really, again, not a matchup where I don't feel comfortable taking them. But again, this has just been my tier list, and I didn't even really want to do this. I more or less just did this. Well, I kind of did, or else I wouldn't have. But yeah, it's not something I really plan to do very often. I might do one of these videos, you know, once every year or so. But as it currently stands, as of the Charybdis patch, I'll call it, this is my tier list. So I'm sure you'll disagree with me on one or many points, and I very much encourage you to put your disagreement down in the comments below, or your agreement if you happen to agree with me on certain aspects. I'm a little bit strapped for time, so I didn't go into too much detail on what I think of certain matchups, but if you guys really enjoyed this, I can maybe go through the different factions and kind of talk about what matchups I think are good and bad, maybe in a dedicated video for each faction. Although that would take a lot of time and would very much be subject to change, so I'm not crazy about the idea, but if you guys really want me to, I mean, I'm willing to, certainly. I do enjoy sitting here and talking into this microphone about this game, so if you couldn't tell already. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching. If you do like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button, so every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thank you once again for watching, and we'll see you next time.